Hey DCC, it has been a month since I have been with you online like this. I've really enjoyed chatting the last two Sunday mornings, just watching along with all of you. And I'm going to do my best today to not make this about me. I'm going to just give you a quick health update, and then I am going to tell the story of what happened to me in the hospital room that night. But today is really about you and me and our experience with God this year. I feel that so strongly. So, first of all, it's great to be back. Amy said to me a couple days ago, "Wow, you've really had a good break." And I said, "This doesn't feel like a break. This feels like I've been to hell and back." And she agreed. And so, anyway, whatever we call this last month, I'm so glad to be back with all of you guys. I saw a T-shirt about 4 or 5 days ago that said 2020 across the top, and then underneath had the 5 stars for like the rating stars for like rating a hotel or a product, and only 1 star was filled in, and underneath that it said definitely would not recommend. And I thought that really captures well where I see us going here in the next few weeks, maybe the next month or so, as we just unpack together what in the world has happened this year. So I'm going to tell my story and end with a scripture that relates to the story of what happened to me in the hospital room that night. And I'm going to go back to the beach the day before this all happened. By the way, I'm doing like 1,000% better. My pain finally went away, I think, completely about 5 days ago. And the antibiotic has been working. The only issue I really have right now is I'm exhausted after I do anything. We walk around our simple block here in the neighborhood, and I come home and I like crash and take a nap. And I'll take it based on where I was a month ago or 3 weeks ago. I feel so much better. So again, thank you for praying for me and for all the notes and support. We love you guys a lot. So I'm going to start on the beach the day before I got sick, which was a month ago this past night, in the middle of the night. Earlier that day, I spent the whole day on the beach. I ran that morning, and during my run, I really had kind of this inspired kind of time with God where I felt like I was understanding or seeing what was happening this year in 2020. I just was on that run that morning on the beach. I was just thinking, like, there's so much chaos. There's confusion everywhere this year. There's confusion about schools. This was before our local Loudoun County school system had made their decision. That decision was made while we were at the beach that week to do the hybrid model. And then it got reversed to we're not going to have school in person at all. It's going to all be online. Well, I think it was the day or two before that final decision was made. Teachers were confused and disagreeing about what the plan should be. Parents were confused. Students have been confused about how they should feel about school. There's so much political confusion in our country. I mean, that goes without saying, and the division. I've watched black leaders disagree about the nature of some of the protests that have been happening. I mean, everywhere we look, there's confusion about finances. The financial, should Congress be giving out more money and putting us in further debt? A lot of us are saying, well, yes, we need it right now. A lot of us are saying, no, we can't go into further debt. There's confusion about the vaccine. Like, are we racing too fast to develop a vaccine? Another medical example is hydroxychloroquine. I see doctors and government officials saying, no, we should not use that prophylactically. And then I'll see a doctor later that night say, I'm giving it to every one of my staff in my office. It's like every topic, every area of life, there's total confusion this year. There's confusion in how we think about the future, how we think about the fall, about gathering for church. Some churches have begun gathering together in person, and some have decided to stop and go back to being online. Other churches are waiting longer. We're looking at starting to gather in person in about a month, sometime in mid to late August. We don't know if we're going to actually do that. That's our plan and our hope. So on the beach that morning, all of that is racing through my mind. How much confusion. I've never in my life known a time like this year where almost every part of life is confused and everybody's confused about it. And so I'm running and started walking at one point, talking to God about this, and pulled up my phone and I did a voice memo about a series that I'd like to end summer on, talking about 2020 and kind of a play on words on the vision of 2020, kind of losing sight. Nobody knows what's happening this year, and getting clarity about what has really been happening in 2020. And that it's really about God using this year to really take a sense of control away from all of us. And that's essentially what the series was going to be about. Okay, so fast forward to the middle of the night, that next night, when I began to lose total control of my life, is what it felt like within a day or two. And I'm not going to rehearse my story and the details of what happened there. I ended up in the hospital in South Carolina. One of the many things that I learned within a day or two in the South Carolina hospital is I had lost control of, and I'm being transparent here enough to kind of give you a sense of where I was at the night in the hospital that I'm going to get to, and the story I'm going to tell. In South Carolina, one of the losses of control that I felt, in addition to I couldn't see Amy. Amy dropped me off at the emergency room door. She was not allowed in the hospital the 3 or 3.5 days I was there. In addition to not being able to see my family and losing the beach week that we really felt like we needed as a family, I lost the ability to go to the bathroom, which kind of sounds funny looking into a camera saying it, but man, it was not funny. Like, it was painful. It was scary. A tube was placed in me so that I could go to the bathroom, which stayed in me, by the way, for 17 days. That just came out about a week ago, about 6 days ago. And I felt like I got a piece of my life back. For 17 days, I had that tube in me, and I wasn't sure for those 17 days if I would really be able to go to the bathroom the way I have my whole life. So I don't know how that sounds to you, comical or scary, but it was scary alone in that hospital room in South Carolina. And there were other parts of my life that I felt I lost control of. Okay, they got my white blood count down enough to put me in a car so that Amy could drive me back to Northern Virginia. And then the doctors here were concerned enough about the nature of this infection that they put me back into the hospital in Fair Oaks to treat this with an IV antibiotic, which I've explained. The specialist who first saw me said that he didn't really trust the report from South Carolina that my prostate had an abscess on it. He said in 30 years of being a urologist, he'd never actually seen it. He's heard of it, but he'd never seen it. It's incredibly rare. So he ordered another CAT scan here in Fairfax, which came back with an abscess, like a bubble of infection. I've lost all sense of dignity. So I'm saying things right now that a month ago would have never dreamt I'd be saying publicly and online. It was a bubble of abscess on my prostate, and it came back showing the same that it did in South Carolina. And this doctor was like, wow, I've actually in 30 years, this is what he said to me, in 30 years of being a urologist, I've never actually seen this. I called my partner who's been practicing for 30 years, and he said he's never seen it either, which was really comforting to hear from a specialist that had been assigned to me. So what happened, and this is my story leading up to that night for a sense of control that I lost here while in the hospital at Fair Oaks Hospital. Specialist after specialist started coming into my room that first full day in the hospital here, telling me that they had never seen this before. The colorectal doctor, the urologist, infectious disease doctor, one by one, this specialist team that had been assigned to me, all were saying, wow, we've never actually seen this case. And one of the doctors said, this is 1,000,001. Prostates get infected, we deal with those, but having an abscess is very unusual and it's very serious. Well, Then a doctor came in and introduced himself and said, this infection is not going to go away with medicine alone. It needs to be drained. And so we are collaborating as a team to figure out how to drain this infection. And I said, okay, can we drain it like within the hour? Can we do that today? Well, then each specialist starts coming back into my room every half hour or so to say, hey, I'm colorectal. Listen, there's no way I'm going to touch this surgically. There's too many nerves around the prostate that make that very risky. There's a very good chance during surgery we could do something where you would never go to the bathroom the same way again, like normally. And I was like, and then the urologist 30 minutes later comes in and says, yeah, they're talking about draining it, but I'm not going to be the one to drain it. I don't want to go near this surgically. And after the third doctor comes in and tells me the same thing, I'm starting to freak out. I've been told that this has to be drained to be really treated and for the infection to go away. And then all the specialists come back in within a couple hours and tell me none of them know how to drain it. The doctor that told me it needed to be drained never came back in into my hospital room and had left to go back to his office. I found out later, and I called a couple times, and he's the one doctor I never heard from again. So it's that night. I've talked to Amy on the phone. We were already discouraged. My discouragement that day really fell into like a solid case of depression. I was in a bad place, just sitting there like I've lost my sense of work. I don't have an ability to communicate with the church. I can't see my family. I've lost like bodily functions that are normal. Like I have lost all control of my life, and now it's getting dark outside. And that's another thing. My room, the hospital was fantastic. I mean, everybody to a person was so great. The nurses, I think nurses should be paid like the highest salaries in our country after this experience I've had. I mean, it's remarkable what these doctors and nurses do every day for strangers, for total strangers. The one complaint about the hospital is my window was kind of behind me and faced a brick wall. And so everything about this experience was just depressing and discouraging. And there was no good news. I felt like I had an infection that nothing was going to be able to treat effectively. And this takes me to the night that I want to tell you about. I never heard back from that doctor who first originally told me we've got to figure out a way to drain it in order to really treat this. And then all the other doctors said, we can't drain it. I can't drain it. I don't know if anybody's going to be able to drain it. And I don't hear back from that doctor. And so it's starting to get dark outside, and the nurses have settled me down to try to sleep. I'm not able to sleep. I've lost my ability to sleep because of the catheter tube. And I'm sitting in the hospital bed at about the lowest point I think I've ever been in my life. I've never sensed such a loss of control over anything, my family, my interaction, my ability to communicate, my ability to get up out of a bed and take 3 steps without wires and without people helping me. And I'm sitting there and tears start streaming down my face, and I start talking to God. And you know, there are many, many Psalms where God is praised, and there are many Psalms in Scripture where like fists are being shaken at God, like, God, you've left me. Where are you? My life makes no sense right now. And sometimes, oddly, those Psalms give us comfort, like really encourage us, depending on where we are. You know, like if David the psalmist or other psalmists could be this discouraged and being this honest with God, well, then I can too. And so I'm kind of in that place when just it's so discouraged and so depressed, having no sense of control. And then the thought hit me, wow, this is what I was understanding about what's happening this whole year to all of us the morning before I got sick, that run on the beach. I really felt God showing me that what this year is really about is we're all kind of being level set in our own sense of pride, our own sense of control. we have a confidence in our own sense of being God of our lives when we're in control. And on the beach that morning, it became clear to me God is allowing all of us to lose a sense of control over our financial well-being, over our future, our retirements, our job securities, health, schools, everything. Who do we trust politically? Medical doctors are contradicting each other in the news about things. I'm seeing people of color who are beginning to debate about the nature of how we're protesting. And, I'm kind of repeating some of that from the beach that morning. And it all comes back to me while I'm laying there in the bed that night. It's gotten dark outside. My room is dark. I'm in a really bad place. And I realize, and wow, now I'm at the place in life where I've never felt such a loss of control. And then it was God's voice that filled that room. And I hope you've had this experience. I've had it many times. If not, I'm gonna try to describe this to you. I didn't hear anything audibly. I didn't see anything, but it would not have been clear if if God had written on a piece of paper and put it in front of me. It's like a truth that fills your mind and heart, and wow, God's speaking to me. This is true. I'm aware. It's an awareness of truth. That's the best way I can describe God's voice. God's voice was so clear to me in a moment, just laying in that hospital bed, when I understood the truth that God was making clear to me. This is what I'm doing. It was as if, hearing it audibly, but not hearing it audibly. The understanding that God was saying to me, this is what I'm doing. You can try to control it, or you can be okay with me in control. If an angel, which I've never seen, floated into the room or walked into the room and said the words face to face, looking into my eyes, it would not have been more real than what I understood in my soul, in my heart, that God was saying, this is what I'm doing. You can be in control. You can try to be in control, Brad, or you can be okay with me being in control. And I knew this was God. It didn't make it easy. And I just laid there and I kind of sat in the truth of what I was understanding. And then it was almost as if, now I'm going to talk about my reaction, my awareness of truth from within me of what I was understanding my response to be. And it was almost as if God was giving me the words. And I hope that makes sense. This is how I responded within a couple of minutes there in the hospital that night. I responded with this awareness. I can try to be in control. I can try to keep control. I can try to ask a lot more questions and get doctors in here and call more doctors, or try to get that doctor who never came back into my room. I can try to be in control, and that will only be bad. That was the awareness that I had. That will only be bad. Or I can let God be in control, as bad as this is, and it will be good. I just knew it. I knew it like I could see my feet in front of me. I knew I could try to take control and it will be bad, or I can allow God to be in control, and as bad as things are right now, it will be good. And I don't mean if I keep control or try to be in control, my health will get worse. I didn't have that sense. It wasn't like doom and gloom. I just knew the stress of trying to be in control, the anxiety, this depression that I'm not used to, will only grow. It was that kind of awareness. I can try to be in control and it will be bad. Like, I'm not going to be at peace. I'm not going to be moving with God. Or I can be okay with God being in control. And as bad as things are, it's going to be good. And that wasn't a prediction. I didn't necessarily have a prediction. I'm going to wake up tomorrow and be healthy and everything's going to be fine and this infection's going to go away. It wasn't even that. I just knew that as bad as this is, I will be in the space of good if I allow God control, if I surrender my control to him. And so I did. I mean, tears are streaming at this point. And I told God a few things there. It was really three things that I gave him control of. I said, God, I want you to be in control and not me. And so I'm surrendering to you my control, and I'm allowing you to be in control. I want your timing, your plan, and I want your control. Those are the three things I said. And I think the order was your plan, your timing, and your control. And then I went back to the timing, like that suggests that I'm going to be fine. I'm just going to leave it to God when. And I remember telling God, I'm not even sure I'm going to be fine. I'm not sure they're going to know how to get this infection out of me. I'm okay with you being in control. I'm okay if I don't get better, if I don't get my normal life back. I mean, I'm telling God, like, I want that life back, but I'm okay with you being in control and me not being in control. And what happened within, I'm going to say 30 seconds. I mean, it was like immediately was a peace that sort of settled in on me, almost like a blanket. I sort of pictured like, wow, what just happened was a peace blanket just kind of fell and rested all over me. The good and the peace that I experienced in the next few minutes that lasted all the way through the night. It was the best night's sleep I'd had since this had started like a week and a half earlier. I don't know how to describe it. It's funny, Paul says that when we give Christ our lives fully, that we would have a peace that surpasses human knowledge. And that happened to me that night. I didn't know how to predict what was going to happen to me, and yet I had moved into this space of good, of life. And life was right. I was laying there in that hospital bed in truth. I was in the space of truth, of good. That's the best way I can explain it. I've been working on this for a couple of weeks. How do I explain the sense that I had? I had moved into a space of good and truth because I had surrendered control. And to say that I slept well that night, I mean, I was still awake and nurses came in during the night, but I actually slept. Like I slept and woke up like I'd been in a hard sleep throughout the night. And I just knew everything is fine. I don't know how healthy I'm going to get or when this is going to go away or if it's going to go completely away. But I was fine, like really fine, because I knew everything was okay. Even though everything wasn't okay, I knew everything was okay. I woke up the next morning just thinking like, wow, I'm really, for the first time in a week and a half or 2 weeks, really settled. I'm not stressing about what's going to happen to me. And I'm not going to say it was 5 minutes. It was within the hour. The first doctor came in and said, hey, I think we have a plan. And the plan was to try some different antibiotics, to keep doing CAT scans to monitor this abscess and to watch my white blood count. And he said, hey, and your blood work came back and your white blood count has dropped again, which was a really good sign. That means your body's, the serious fight against a serious infection was reducing. My body, I'm not explaining this well. I was not fighting the infection as hard because my white blood count had been coming down. And that was good news. And it was the first optimistic anything that a doctor had said to me in 2 days. And then another doctor came in and sort of reiterated like, hey, I'm feeling pretty good about what we're going to do here. We're not going to try to address this surgically. It's too risky, but we feel okay about it. We feel like we're going to land on an antibiotic. We're going to try a few, and we're going to be watching on CAT scans and the white blood count. And I just felt this sense of confidence that the doctors were in a better place than they were the day before. And then some good things happened in the hospital that day. A CAT scan later that day came back good, better. And yeah, so I want to go back to laying in the bed that night and the sense of peace that came over me. I went back to a scripture that I had started reading a couple days earlier, Psalm 34. And that's how I'm going to end this today. I'm going to end by reading the first part of Psalm 34. And next week, I'm going to unpack it with you. I'm going to get into some of what David's saying that I think is part of the mystery of walking in the good of God, the life of God. Because already in that hospital bed, from 30 minutes earlier when I was in depression and like in a bad place and discouraged, and now I feel this peace and this confidence that even though all this bad is around me, I'm suddenly in good and I'm in a place of life. I really felt more alive. It reminded me of Jesus in Luke 9:24 saying, you can try to hold on to your life, you can try to save your life and you'll lose it. But if you lose your life for my sake, you'll actually find it. You'll find full life. That's what I was experiencing again. I was letting go of control and surrendering all of it to God. And I had just moved into this place of full life. Even though the surroundings and if I looked out the window into the brick wall and looked around the dark hospital room was pretty depressing, I knew I'm in a place of life right now. And that only leads to good. No matter what, it only leads to good. That's the way God works. That's the way God's kingdom works. That's the way we were designed to live originally, before sin, before this world was broken by sin. We were designed to live with God in full control, which leaves us in full life. And so I want to read to you the first part of Psalm 34 that I read that night after this peace had kind of settled in on me and I knew I was in this place of life. I read again for the third or fourth time. David had been anointed as a young man the future king of Israel, which is great. God had chosen him and everyone knew it. The whole nation knew he's going to be the future king. And yet the current king was still in place as king, King Saul, who was an evil person who didn't follow God's heart. And this went from really good for David and David's future to really bad when he learned that King Saul was trying to kill him and actually threatened his life, and David had to run for his life. And he writes Psalm 34 in the middle of this, trying to figure out, what is God doing? He called me to become the future king. And the nation has celebrated me as future king, but now I'm running from a madman who's throwing spears at me. And I don't know where to live. I don't know where to sleep at night. That's where David is in life right now. He's really confused and trying to figure out God's plan. And he writes Psalm 34. In the first few verses, talk about how much he'll continue to praise God. I will still praise God, who is worth being praised because he's God and he knows what he's doing. And then in verse 4, and this gets into what we're going to unpack next week. I'm going to just unpack one part of this here before I close, and I'll do the rest next week with you. But he says, I sought the Lord, and he answered me. He delivered me from all my fears. I don't know if you're a person of fear or a person who carries anxiety. We're going to talk about this more next week. I sought the Lord, and he answered me. He delivered me from all of my fears. Next verse. Those who look to him are radiant. Their faces are never covered with shame. We're going to talk about people who live today in their past, who define themselves by their past, and they carry guilt and carry shame. This poor man, David says in the next verse, called, and the Lord heard him. He saved him out of all of his troubles. Remember, this is David who's running for his life, and he's writing this in a cave one night. Fleeing for his life from the king, the one who's most in charge of his country, who's trying to kill him. David's writing, this poor man called, and the Lord heard him, and the Lord saved him out of all of his troubles. The angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear him, and the Lord delivers them. I can't wait to talk about that next week, the idea of God encamping around us. Taste and see that the Lord is good. Blessed is the one who takes refuge in him. Fear the Lord, you, his holy people. We're going to talk next week about this Hebrew word fear. In English, to us, fear means to be afraid of. That's not what this word means. We'll talk about that next week. Fear the Lord, you his holy people, for those who fear him lack nothing. The lions may grow weak and hungry, but those who seek the Lord lack no good thing. I'm reading this that night in the hospital room when I've given God complete control, total control of my future, my health, my life, whether I'll outlive this infection, my ability to communicate with my family, my job, my heart for our church, and being able to communicate with you, everything, and I mean it. I really can genuinely say that I gave God everything that night in that hospital bed, and had such a sense of life and good and truth. I don't know how to humanly explain that. It is the way God's kingdom works. When you give up your life completely to him, you find your whole life. You find full life. This last verse that I read here says, the lions may grow weak and hungry, but those who seek the Lord lack no good thing. That's the one thing I'm going to just spend a minute or two on here before I close with you guys. The verse I first read in verse 4 says the same thing. Seek. I sought the Lord. I made my heart to seek after the Lord, and he answered me. He delivered me from all my fears. Verse 10, the lions may grow weak and hungry, but those who seek the Lord lack no good thing. I think to you and I a lot, when we're in control of life, we're in control of our finances, our house, our job, our future, our family, we kind of have our life together. We interpret seek the Lord, I seek the Lord, as meaning, hey, I've got this issue happening in my life. I need God right now to fix it. I need God to fix this financially. I need God to make me healthy this week so I can get back to work. So I'm going to seek him. A lot of times we seek God, but we seek him for his blessing that we need from him. And what was so clear to me that night was that while David is writing this in a cave, running for his life, he's not seeking God to just get him out of this fix. He's seeking God's control. He's seeking God to be in control. David, in writing this, was surrendering control. I seek you, Lord. And the result is that God delivered me from all of my fears. God, seeking the Lord in verse 10, leaves me lacking no good thing. And so I'm just going to make that the message and wrap this up by saying we are going to be spending the weeks and month ahead, and maybe even longer. Maybe this will be 5 or 6 weeks. We spend on, I think I'm going to call the series Seeing 2020 Clearly. And we're going to be talking about this idea of giving up control. That's what God's doing right now. You can say that God doesn't do bad, and I say that. God's not the author of bad, but in this broken world where there's bad, he uses circumstances and bad situations to teach us and shape us and to get us to let go of our grip. And we're going to talk in these weeks ahead about what God's doing in 2020, where everyone has lost a sense of control. Everybody has lost a sense of their confidence. Our medical system has lost their sense of confidence. Our schooling, Loudoun County Schools is one of the, prominent school systems on the East Coast based on a lot of numbers and metrics, and people move here to this part of the DC area for the school system, Fairfax County and Loudoun County and the surrounding school systems. I mean, look at what's happening in our school systems. It is like all out meltdown has happened in not knowing what to do and what the right approach is for the fall. Nobody has a sense of control, and it is so clear to me that that is what God is doing. It's not by accident. We can go with it, and we can play into that, and we can loosen our hold of control and allow this year to be a year where we give God more control than ever, or we can try to fight it and we can try to be in control and take control back and blame who's at fault and who's wrong. And I just want us to be people who let go and truly put God in control. So I'm going to pray with you. Jesus, I'm praying for everyone right now who hasn't truly let go and placed you in control of their life. You deserve being in control of our life, Jesus, because you beat death. Anyone who can come back to life from the dead deserves to be in control. And so, Jesus, I put you in full control of my life today, knowing that giving up my life to you is what leads to full life. And it's so counterintuitive to how we live in this natural world, God. I pray for those watching and listening right now that they would have the courage and they would have that inner sense of your voice enough to know that they need to let go and put you in control of their lives. And so wherever you're watching or listening from right now, I just encourage you and challenge you to make my hospital bed prayer your prayer. Jesus, I give you control. I give you full control of my life, full control of my relationships, my marriage, my sense of failing as a parent, my financial uncertainty, my job insecurity. Every part of my life I put in your hands because I know that's where I'll find full life. Amen. I love you guys so much. Thank you for listening through my story. I hope this has spoken to you. Hey, and just say a prayer. I have my what we think is last CAT scan, and if it's a good CAT scan, by all indications, my medicine has been working. My energy level is so much higher. All points to tomorrow morning, where I think this PICC line and IV antibiotic goes away. And so I'm just thanking God for the life and health and good that has been my last couple of weeks since that night in the hospital room. I love you guys so much. I'll see you online this week.